It was meant to be a tribute, not a scandal. In August 2025, the royal family announced a historic charity auction, the 2006 Range Rover, once personally driven by Queen Elizabeth II, a symbol of her independence and 7 decades of quiet strength. But as the gavel prepared to fall, whispers began to spread through Buckingham's corridors, missing parts, secret buyers, and a consort's shadowy hand behind the sale. The request was standard, the tone formal, but what followed was anything but. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Thompson, royal aide-de-camp and decorated officer of the Queen's Guard, had served through war zones, diplomatic summits, and the final, fragile months of Queen Elizabeth II. But nothing had prepared him for this confrontation, because this time, the enemy sat on a throne. He had submitted a quiet leave request to the palace's private office. 3 days. A weekend wedding. No press, no spectacle. Just vows, silence, and the woman he had loved in the shadows for years. The response came not through an aide, but through a direct summons. Queen Camilla wanted a word. Alone. She sat at the edge of her Clarence House office chair, diamond brooch catching the winter sun, sipping chilled gin. "So, Johnny," she said, voice too sweet to be sincere. "You want to skip duty for a personal engagement?" He stood tall in uniform, the weight of discipline in his shoulders. "Yes, ma'am. A short leave. Personal matter." Camilla's expression stiffened. "I don't like surprises," she said slowly, "especially not when they involve refusals." Thompson didn't respond. His silence was his sword. Camilla set the glass down louder than necessary. "Do you remember Lady Bella Fitzroy?" Of course he did. Camilla's grandniece. She had cornered him at a reception weeks ago, trying to lure him into a photo opportunity he hadn't asked for. Then came the late-night messages, the hints, the invitation to a private tea arranged by Camilla herself. He declined, gently, but firmly. And that's when the frost began. What Thompson didn't know was that Bella Fitzroy wasn't just a flirt, she was Camilla's attempt to build her own faction within the palace. Young, media-savvy, ambitious. The plan? Marry Bella to Britain's most admired soldier. Control the narrative. Cement legacy. Manufacture loyalty. Thompson had quietly walked away. And now, this was the price. "I don't appreciate men who embarrass women of my family," Camilla continued, voice sharp. "With respect, Your Majesty," he said, "I never intended to embarrass anyone. I declined privately, without incident." Camilla's smile dropped. "You may go through with your little wedding, Mr. Thompson, but not as a lieutenant colonel." She stood. "I'll have your commission reviewed. Cavalry needs foot officers. Let's see how you look on horseback again." The words hit like a slap, but Thompson didn't flinch. "You're dismissing me for getting married?" he asked. Camilla walked past him, hand grazing the curtain, staring out at the courtyard. "I'm disciplining a man who's chosen romance over responsibility. If you think loyalty means picking your wife over your sovereign, you've learned little." And then, the final blow. "If you step away for this, I'll make sure you never return to court. Your ceremonial title will be stripped. Your legacy? Forgotten." Thompson nodded slowly. "Then I step away, ma'am, fully aware." He saluted, sharp and precise, and walked out. By the next morning, Camilla's office had circulated a temporary reassignment order for Jonathan Thompson, effective immediately. The internal code was clear: pending disciplinary review. The reason listed? Neglect of duty in time of royal transition. But the guards knew better. One by one, officers who had stood beside Thompson for years began rotating out their own assignments. Captain Marsden volunteered to cover the next trooping rehearsal. Sergeant Weller took over the ceremonial inspection. Others quietly rearranged shifts. No one spoke publicly. But within the barracks, everyone knew. If Camilla wanted to isolate Thompson, she'd have to isolate all of them. The wedding was still 4 days away. But the war had begun. Not with guns, not with scandal, but with schedules, silence, and the kind of quiet loyalty Camilla could never command. And somewhere, in a sealed drawer in Kensington Palace, a handwritten note from Queen Elizabeth II remained untouched, wrapped in parchment with one name on it: Thompson. But that was for another day. The royal court may be draped in silk, polished oak, and silver cutlery, but beneath it all, it still runs on chain of command. Orders come from the top. Silence is expected below. But in the weeks following Queen Camilla's threat against Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Thompson, that chain began to fray in ways no monarch could have anticipated. It started with a rota swap. Captain Marsden, a ceremonial guard stationed at Windsor, emailed HQ and offered to take over Thompson's duties for the upcoming security drill. "Personal leave," he wrote in the comments section, requesting reassignment on compassionate grounds. No one flagged it. Then Sergeant Weller, scheduled for palace briefing, called in training oversight and asked to cover a double shift later that week. 2 others did the same. Even a young footman, barely 3 months into service, quietly swapped shifts to cover an event Thompson would have attended. None of it was overt. No one wore protest ribbons. No one leaked to the press. But within 2 days, a pattern had emerged in the Royal Guard's internal system. Where Thompson's name was scheduled, others appeared. Where duty fell silent, hands were raised. Where punishment was expected, Brotherhood responded. Camilla noticed. She wasn't a fool. Her private secretary, Mr. Edwin Hollister, delivered a color-coded chart to Clarence House on Monday morning, showing 6 unapproved rota swaps, 3 indirect shift requests, and a sudden increase in leave forms among ceremonial officers. "This isn't insubordination," Hollister muttered, lips tight. "Not technically, but it's coordinated. They're protecting him." Camilla sipped her tea, not bothering to glance at the chart. "Then punish them quietly," she snapped. "Pick off a few. Set an example. But if we push too hard, if we don't," she hissed, "they'll start believing they're irreplaceable. That loyalty outranks the crown." Meanwhile, in a quiet side hall of Buckingham Palace, the men of the Queen's Guard met without fanfare. They didn't plan revolutions. They didn't shout or curse. They remembered. They remembered Thompson standing at full attention during Queen Elizabeth II's final vigil, tears unshed in his eyes. They remembered him canceling his own birthday leave to cover a diplomatic arrival. They remembered how he once carried an unconscious horse guard off parade grounds in full regalia. They remembered how he never shouted, never asked for thanks, never betrayed a confidence. "You don't find men like that anymore," Marsden muttered, "and we're letting her tear him down over politics." "No," another said, "we're not." So they planned not to fight Camilla, but to shield Thompson from the political poison dripping through the marble walls. Each man took turns covering duties. One would file an injury report. Another would claim family bereavement. Every hole in the system was used. One of them even cracked a joke. For a woman obsessed with power, she's completely powerless to stop integrity. But Camilla wasn't done. On the eve of Thompson's wedding, a letter was hand-delivered to his residence, not by royal courier, but by a mounted officer of the household cavalry. The seal was broken. The letter read only one line: "Your reassignment is now permanent. You will report to Cavalry Depot by Monday morning. Uniform downgrade effective immediately." No explanation, no ceremony, just demotion. Thompson said nothing. He placed the letter beside his metal box and turned to Olivia. "It's done," he said simply. But Olivia, calm and firm, walked across the room and opened a wooden box one Thompson had never seen before. Inside was a letter, sealed in red wax, marked E.R., Elizabeth Regina. "My darling," Olivia said softly, holding it out. "She wrote this. For you, before she passed." Thompson took it, hands steady for once breaking. In the silence of that room, as his military rank was being stripped and his career dismantled for the crime of refusing a queen's niece, he held in his hands something far more powerful. A letter from the monarch who knew his worth. But the contents would not be read, not yet, because there was still a wedding to happen, and Camilla had one last card to play. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, but at dawn on the morning of the ceremony, Jonathan Thompson's phone buzzed with a final blow. "This is a formal notice. Any unauthorized absence from duty today will be recorded as dereliction of service. Immediate reassignment to mounted regiment, if not present, at 1,400 hours. Office of the Queen Consort." There was no signature, no official crest, but everyone knew Camilla had pulled the plug. And yet, down in Wiltshire, at the Modest Street, Mary's Church near Great Bedwin, Olivia Lewis still waited, her hair already done, her dress hanging from a simple oak hook. The ceremony was set for 4 p.m. The priest had arrived. The florals were in place. Every pew was lined with bluebells and white roses, Queen Elizabeth's favorite. But the groom? He was still in uniform, pacing a small royal training yard, forced to choose between duty and the life he had waited years to build. At exactly 10:15 a.m., a chilling command was issued from Clarence House. Effective immediately, lock down all security vehicles. Any request for ceremonial transport must be routed through the consort's private office. It was unprecedented. Never in recent royal memory had a queen consort directly intervened in personnel logistics, especially not for a mid-ranking officer. But to Camilla, this wasn't about rank. It was about punishment. She remembered too clearly the slight. Just a year earlier, she had proposed her niece, Lady Celia Marchmont, daughter of the Duchess of Devonshire, as a suitable prospect for Thompson. The goal wasn't love, it was loyalty. Camilla wanted her own circle. People who owed her allegiance, not Catherine, not William, and certainly not Elizabeth's memory. Thompson had declined, politely but firmly, and in Camilla's world, a refusal was rebellion. But the guards weren't done. At 11:42 a.m., a black unmarked SUV rolled through the south gate of Buckingham Palace. It wasn't logged, it wasn't official. Inside were 3 men in full ceremonial dress, off-duty, technically in violation of protocol but united in purpose. One of them handed Thompson a note. "She doesn't own our choices. Get in." For the first time that day, Thompson smiled. Olivia kept her calm. She'd been trained to serve under pressure. But when the royal piper assigned to play the Queen's processional whispered that Thompson hadn't been seen, her hands trembled. Then the whispers started. 2 members of the palace staff, posted discreetly in the back row, received texts. Royal watchers began arriving in small clusters. Even the village baker, who had prepared lemon cakes with monograms, pulled out his phone in confusion. Will he come? Did she stop it? Rumors began to swirl like storm clouds. But just before 3 p.m., a sound cut through the soft Wiltshire air. Bagpipes and hooves. The SUV stopped 2 blocks away. Thompson, now in full ceremonial dress, walked the rest of the way with his guards at his side. Behind him, one horse, riderless, followed silently in honor of the Queen. He walked with fire in his eyes. Not rage, but resolve. And when he stepped through the wooden doors, every guest stood. Not because of protocol, but because in that moment, Jonathan Thompson represented something greater than rank. He represented every man who had served the monarchy not for privilege, but for honor. Even in Wiltshire, Clarence House's shadow stretched long. At 3:50 p.m., a royal courier arrived, sent from Camilla's office. The letter was sealed, crimson wax nearly bleeding into the envelope. The priest paused as the usher handed it over. Thompson read it silently. It was a direct order of withdrawal of honors. Effective immediately, Jonathan Thompson is to be removed from the Royal Service Medal consideration list due to unauthorized absence. It was the final slap, but Olivia stepped forward, placed her hand on his, and in front of everyone, he tore the letter in 2. Not out of anger, out of freedom. Then the doors opened again, and in swept Catherine, Princess of Wales. She wore pale blue, the color Queen Elizabeth wore when knighting Thompson. Her entrance was unannounced, unescorted, but somehow royal in every step. The whispers stopped. Catherine approached Olivia and handed her a small, ornate box. Inside was a pair of cufflinks, engraved with the Queen's initials ER, and the inscription, "To my most loyal shadow. May you find light of your own." Gasps echoed softly. The Queen had written this long before her death, and now it was Catherine who honored her final wish. "Her Majesty told me," Catherine said gently, "that when this day came, no matter the storms, your loyalty would lead you here." And it did. As the ceremony began, Camilla's absence was noted, but it didn't matter, because in that church, before sacred vows and silent prayers, Jonathan Thompson wasn't a demoted guard. He was the living legacy of the Queen's trust, and the wedding that should have never happened became a royal moment history would never forget. The morning after the wedding, a quiet ripple of unease spread across royal corridors. Camilla's plans had failed. Not only had Jonathan Thompson defied her ban and married Olivia Lewis under full ceremonial honor, he had done it with support from the guard, the village, and worst of all, Catherine. It wasn't just a marriage anymore. It was a statement, and Camilla hated statements she didn't control. At 9 a.m., a royal meeting was called in Clarence House under the guise of reassessing ceremonial rotations. Only 3 senior advisors showed up. No one else did. One aide quietly informed Camilla's secretary, "Several officers have opted for personal leave today." Translation: they refused to face her. Even those who attended avoided her eyes, speaking in clipped sentences, citing protocol manuals, avoiding any mention of the wedding. Camilla slung her pan down. "So I'm to be ignored now? Over a guard dog in a uniform and a village girl in borrowed lace?" No one answered. The silence was not just awkward, it was dangerous. That afternoon, Catherine quietly returned to Kensington, but not before stopping by the guard's common quarters. She wore casual navy, no photographers, no press. Just her, a thermos of tea, and a quiet request. "I'd like to thank those who stood beside him." Oh. Thompson was already en route to a temporary assignment at a mounted training facility, pending disciplinary reassessment, Camilla's last petty move. But Catherine wasn't there to undo it. She was there to witness the loyalty Queen Elizabeth had once told her could outlast even crowns. She shook hands. She laughed softly. She listened to every man. And before she left, she whispered, "This isn't over." 2 days later, Catherine was summoned to Clarence House. The room was heavy with expectation. Camilla sitting behind a writing desk, royal advisors flanking both sides, ready for another clarification of roles. But Catherine walked in alone. No aid. No William. Just confidence. Camilla didn't even look up at first. Your attendance at the wedding was not authorized, she began, voice like vinegar. Nor was your presentation of a private royal gift without clearance. Catherine didn't flinch. It was authorized, Your Majesty, by the woman whose initials were engraved on the gift. Camilla's hand stiffened. The air in the room snapped cold. Elizabeth's era has ended, Camilla said sharply. We're building a new image of the monarchy now. Unified, modern, and disciplined. Catherine leaned forward slowly, her voice low. Then I suggest you stop punishing loyalty as if it were rebellion, because the monarchy you inherited is not the one you're dismantling. Silence. Even Camilla's advisors shifted, and in that single moment, power tilted. Not by shouting, not by decree, by a princess who knew the true strength of the crown lay in service, not ego. Thompson's reassignment was more symbolic than functional. His orders were vague, his barracks Spartan, but he carried out every task, polishing saddles, training recruits, reviewing protocols with military precision. He did not complain, but others noticed. The youngest cavalrymen, barely in their 20s, whispered about the Queen's shadow, now relegated to menial duties. One morning, a visiting foreign dignitary recognized him in passing. I remember you beside Queen Elizabeth in Berlin. What are you doing here? Thompson only bowed. Serving, sir. But whispers turned to letters. Letters to questions. And suddenly, Lord Chamberlain's office had a dilemma on its hands. Because the public? They were beginning to ask too. A week after the wedding, an anonymous tip reached several news desks. Details were specific. Camilla had attempted to block a leave request for a wedding. Guards had staged a silent logistical protest. A demotion order had been personally signed without the king's review. Princess Catherine had delivered a private wedding gift tied to Queen Elizabeth's last wishes. Within hours, hashtags trended. Number, Justice for Thompson. Number, Loyalty is royalty. Number, Catherine stands strong. Clarence House went into lockdown. Camilla demanded an internal review. Who leaked it? But the real question was, who would defend her now? The headline broke at 6:01 a.m. Royal Guard stripped of honors for falling in love? By 6:30, every major outlet across Britain had picked up the story. The tabloids fed on it. But the broadsheets? They dug deeper. For the first time, Camilla wasn't shielded by silence. She was exposed. Inside the confidential leak were photocopies of the following documents. A leave request filed by Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Thompson, dated 3 months prior to his wedding. A rejection stamped with "Request denied, non-essential personal activity," bearing the consort's office mark. A memo from Camilla's private secretary suggesting reassignment to household cavalry duties as a disciplinary message. A partial log from the logistics unit showing Clarence House's unprecedented lockdown on royal transportation vehicles. A copy of the rescinded honors shortlist, signed by Camilla, without clearance from the Lord Chamberlain or the sovereign. The leak wasn't just a scandal. It was a coup de grace against Camilla's court image, and the palace was not prepared. Inside the Royal Guard's mess hall, the effect was immediate. Men who once saluted silently now shared one look of agreement. Enough. At the end of the week, 12 members of the Queen's former ceremonial protection detail submitted a joint letter to the Crown Equerry. Effective immediately, we request to be transferred to auxiliary duties. We refuse to continue ceremonial service under a senior royal who penalizes loyalty. The palace couldn't suppress it. The letter leaked. The public saw the names, sergeants, corporals, officers, all previously seen flanking Queen Elizabeth's cortege during her final months. Suddenly, Thompson wasn't just one man punished. He was the first in a line of faithful men targeted. The court press team scrambled to release a statement, but even they couldn't suppress the sentiment boiling online. Camilla dishonors the Queen's shadow to protect her own. Inside Balmoral, King Charles read the dossier in silence. It was late afternoon. The fireplace crackled softly. A tray of untouched tea grew cold beside him. His most senior aide, Lord Everley, cleared his throat. The guards are not bluffing. If we let this fracture widen, you risk losing the last ceremonial men who served your mother. Charles sighed. And my wife? Is dragging the crown into her personal battles, sir? For the first time in months, the king looked genuinely weary. He had stood by Camilla through fire, divorce, scandal, hatred. But what he now faced wasn't just a PR crisis. It was a breach of the monarchy's moral compass. What would you have me do? He asked, his voice low. Restore what was taken. Let the public see the crown stands for its people, not just those who marry into it. There was no anger, just a tired understanding. That night, a single sealed envelope was hand-delivered to Kensington Palace. Catherine stood at her study window when the courier arrived. She did not react. She merely took the letter, nodded her thanks, and opened it quietly. Inside, printed on thick Windsor stationery, by order of the Sovereign, effective immediately, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Thompson is to be reinstated with full honors. Further, he is to be awarded the Royal Victorian Order, Commander, for distinguished personal service to the Crown. Below, the King's seal, and his own signature. Catherine allowed herself a quiet smile, but her real satisfaction wasn't in the signature. It was in the symbol. Thompson had stood firm, the guards had rallied, and now, the Crown had spoken. Camilla sat in her private study with a half-glass of brandy and a growing fury in her eyes. The news played in the background. The Royal Victorian Order awarded to Thompson is seen as a quiet rebuke of the Queen Consort's recent power plays. The anchor's words burned her. She turned to her private secretary. Did Catherine know about this? The order was delivered directly to Kensington. She received it first. I? Of course she did, Camilla hissed. She stood, pacing. She thinks she's her, doesn't she? Elizabeth's little heir without a crown. There it was. Not anger over Thompson, not embarrassment over the leak, but rage over losing control of the narrative to Catherine. And more than that, jealousy. Because while Camilla inherited the title of queen, it was Catherine who had inherited the reverence once reserved for Elizabeth. 10 days after the wedding, at a discreet courtyard in Windsor, a small, untelevised ceremony was held. No trumpets, no press, just a weathered flag, a plaque, and a circle of guards. In front of them, Jonathan Thompson stood tall in full-dress uniform as Princess Catherine presented the medal. She didn't speak long. This is not just for what you did, it is for who you always were when no one was watching. The crown forgets nothing, and neither do those who serve it with honor. Ho! Applause wasn't permitted, but many eyes welled. Olivia stood nearby, hand clutched over her heart. For a moment, she was the only one smiling, because she had known this side of Thompson, long before medals and press ever would. The public response was overwhelming. An online campaign, Number Elizabeth's Guard, raised £220,000 in 5 days for a charity supporting injured royal servicemen. Artists created tribute portraits of Thompson, one depicting him standing between a shadowy Camilla and a luminous ghost of Queen Elizabeth. Social media flooded with messages. He didn't just marry a woman, he married his values. That's the kind of loyalty this country used to stand for. Not all crowns are on heads, some are in actions. Even international media chimed in. CNN's royal correspondent called it the clearest symbolic rejection of consort interference since the Diana era. And at the heart of it all, a guard who refused to kneel for the wrong queen. Suddenly, Camilla's name disappeared from the next 2 public engagements. The palace press office stated she was taking a period of rest due to health fatigue, but insiders whispered otherwise. She's been told to cool her public appearances. The king is furious, William is livid, and Catherine? Untouchable. Behind the scenes, her power had fractured. And the quiet lesson? When you challenge loyalty for your own pride, you might just lose both. The bells of St. George's Chapel did not ring that morning, but if one stood quietly in the inner courtyard of Windsor Castle, they might have heard something even louder. Respect. A kind of silence only earned through sacrifice, loyalty, and the quiet, unshakable strength of those who serve without asking. Jonathan Thompson had walked through fire, political fire, institutional betrayal, and the petty wrath of a queen consort who saw him not as a man, but as a threat to her court of control. But this morning, he stood vindicated. And not alone. It wasn't in the public schedule. There was no press, no photographers, only 20 chairs arranged in a crescent beneath the Queen's gallery, facing a simple lectern draped in the royal standard. Among the seated, Princess Anne, Prince William, Lady Louise, the Duke of Edinburgh, and in the center, flanked by 2 of the last guards who had served the late Queen Elizabeth, stood Princess Catherine, wearing a pearl-white coat dress trimmed with navy velvet, a brooch once belonging to the Queen pinned just above her heart. Next to her, Olivia Lewis, no longer just a civilian, but now known privately as the Queen's Bride. Then came Thompson. He wore the full ceremonial uniform of a lieutenant colonel, shoulders square, back unbent, his chest now gleaming with a new medal, the Royal Victorian Order, shining like the final light of Elizabeth's reign reflected in metal. But that wasn't all. Catherine stepped forward with a small velvet box. Inside it, an engraved golden pocket watch, elegant and untouched by time. The inscription read, "To the one who never turned away. E.R.I." It was Queen Elizabeth II's final personal gift, one she had arranged to be delivered to Thompson upon his marriage. It had been locked in the royal vault under the instruction, only to be delivered by the Princess of Wales. Catherine's voice did not tremble when she spoke. My grandmother always believed loyalty wasn't something inherited by title, but proven in silence, in storms, and in choosing duty when no one is watching. Today, on behalf of her memory, and with the sovereign's blessing, I present this final token of Her Majesty's gratitude. Colonel Thompson, Olivia Lewis, may this gift remind you that love and loyalty are never enemies. In this family, they must walk side by side. For the first time in the long arc of this struggle, Thompson allowed a single tear to trace the line of his cheek, and no one dared look away. There had been rumors that Camilla might attempt to appear, but when the invitation reached her desk marked optional attendee, non-ceremonial, she declined. Her absence was a silence louder than scandal. Whispers grew in the palace corridors. She's been isolated by the king. Even her private staff have been quietly rotated. Charles is reassigning more engagements to William and Catherine. The consort had lost more than face. She had lost her grip. One member of the royal household put it more bluntly. Elizabeth built her legacy with restraint. Camilla tried to build hers with control. Only one of them is still being remembered with reverence. By noon, snippets of the private ceremony had surfaced online. Though no press had been allowed, one close aide loyal to Elizabeth, until the end released a single black and white image. Thompson and Olivia, standing before Catherine as she extended the velvet box. It went viral within hours. Number: for the Queen. Number: the last guard. Number: not all crowns are visible. Number: Catherine reigns in silence. A movement began. Quiet, devout, global, poems, paintings, candlelight vigils by royal fans at Windsor. In the United States, a commentator on morning television remarked, "In the absence of fanfare, the British monarchy just gave us its most human love story in years." Endring. In France, Le Figaro ran a headline, "The return of honor to Windsor, un reine silencieux, un soldat fidèle." In a rare post on her private but verified social account, Lady Louise Windsor posted the photograph of Thompson and Olivia with a caption that shook the younger royals. "This is who I watched protect my grandmother. He was there when the world wasn't. Now, he gets to have a world of his own. She would have smiled today." The post reached over 3 million views in 12 hours. Suddenly, young Britons previously apathetic toward royal traditions began reposting Thompson's story as a kind of quiet rebellion against palace politics. They weren't just watching history, they were participating in it. In the weeks that followed, it became clear that something fundamental had shifted, not just in the public, but in the palace. Catherine was now chairing 2 new military welfare charities, previously overseen by Camilla. William publicly requested Catherine accompany him on his solo overseas diplomatic mission, an unprecedented move. A leaked draft of the Queen's 100th birthday commemorative book listed Catherine as the keeper of ceremonial continuity, and behind closed doors, it was said that even Charles had apologized privately to Thompson. "She may have worn the crown," the king allegedly said, "but you carried the legacy." 3 weeks later, it was announced in the court circular, by command of His Majesty the King, and with advice from the Princess Royal and the Prince of Wales, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Thompson is promoted to Chief Royal Ceremonial Advisor. He will oversee training, tradition, preservation, and personal guard protocols across all royal houses. It was more than a position. It was a declaration that despite the chaos, the slander, and the attempted exile, the crown remembered who had stood guard when it mattered most. In a quiet, private dinner, weeks after the final promotion, Thompson, Olivia, Catherine, William, and Lady Louise gathered at Windsor's West Wing. The toast was simple. William raised his glass to those who serve not for power, not for favor, but because they remember who they are. Everyone drank. And then Catherine leaned over to Olivia. "She loved him, you know, my grandmother, like a son. She once said, 'He won't be the loudest voice in the room, but he'll be the last one standing.'" Olivia smiled. "He always knew. That's why he never left." Sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't about romance alone. Sometimes, they're about integrity. About choosing the hard road when the easy one whispers your name. About standing alone until the right ones stand beside you. Jonathan Thompson didn't shout. He didn't beg. He didn't bend. He simply stood between the institution he served and the storm it failed to see coming. And when the winds cleared, he was still there. Not for power, not for revenge, but because the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II still deserved someone who remembered what it meant to serve her. And now, he serves the future with Olivia by his side.